Greetings, 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 everyone. This is Shaylin Scott with Book Mecca, and welcome to our Breakthrough series. This is a March Madness for real. This is our second author we've had in the month of March, and you will be so delighted that we have Jeffrey Colvin with us today. We will be speaking with him about his great book called Africaville and all about him and his works. And so, as a reminder, our Breakthrough series in Book Mecca is an online Black bookstore and literary platform for Black authors and all things Black lit. Our mission and goal is to amplify and to bring the voices and stories of Black authors and all the great things that we do to light and right to your doorsteps. So, without further ado, I want to bring Jeffrey on. Welcome, welcome. Hi.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for joining us today. And where are you joining us from, Jeffrey?
I'm joining you from cold upstate New York. I've been doing a little bit of traveling, but I'm now ensconced in a place in upstate New York trying to get some writing done.
I understand that for sure. Well, we are so thankful that you are here with us today. So I want to let our viewers know a little bit about you. So I have a little brief bio. Okay. It says, your bio says that you have written Africaville. This is his debut novel, you guys. It was awarded the 2020 Honor for Fiction Prize by the Black Caucus of the American Library Association and the Hurston Wright Foundation's Legacy Award for Debut Fiction. Debut fiction, y'all. Africaville's been featured in Publishers Weekly, NPR, Vogue, WBAI, the Boston Globe, the BBC, the CB, all the acronyms, you guys, all of them, the Globe. And on top of his writing, he's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, Harvard University, Columbia University, where he's received an MFA in fiction, and he's an assistant editor at Narrative Magazine. This past fall, he was at the Hodson Trust John Carter Brown Fellow at Brown University. So I know that your bio is like this. So thank you for giving us just that glimpse into what your world is. Does that give a good representation of everything you've kind of taken on?
Yes, I think that's very, very good. I tried to shorten it so that people can get a little bit of glimpse of a little bit of who I am, but also, that I've lived somewhat in my life. And I try to bring some of that life into the writing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, excuse my little phone here going berserk. Well, I will just dive right in on all the questions that we have. And viewers, if you have any questions at all too, feel free to go into the comments and you can post and share, even start a watch party if you guys want to as well. And so we'll just get on started here. So a little bit about the book for Africaville. If you have not read the book, see, I have mine with all my notes. I've had it a while. If you don't have it, go grab the book. If you didn't see my picture, I'll show you exactly what it looks like. This right here. This is the book. Go grab the book, you guys. It is worth every read. And would you call the book historical fiction, Jeffrey? Is that kind of the genre you put it in?
Yes, I would say that, given that it begins a couple of centuries ago in the 1790s and goes all the way up to the 1990s. But I would say it's historical fiction.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. That's along the lines of the type of books I like to read, ones that are so close to reality, it's almost so familiar. I love books like that.
Yes,
so a little bit.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I enjoy reading those kinds of books as well, and particularly when I find a bit of history and that I can go back and research. I like doing that and adding that to my writing.
Okay. So you guys who are out there, I'll give you a little glimpse because I don't want to tell you everything about the book because you need to read the book to really know about it. But something that is really eye-catching, this is how it's been written or a little bit described, is a captivating novel, which it truly is. It weaves a rich tapestry of the colorful threads of multiple generations of one family. And it's based on a real settlement in Halifax, Nova Scotia, whose Black population are descendants of slaves from the American South, the Caribbean. And this is all during this harsh maritime landscape with bigotry and racism. But it's about these lost free Black communities throughout North America that have kind of faded through history, but it's their story. It's a glimpse into it. And it's so much more to it that you guys, I can't even tell you. It's so much more to the story that you should read. One thing in particular that I found really captivating was the viewpoint that you took of your main character, and that's Miss Kathella. How did you come up with that name, Kathella? I
Well,
could be even be saying it wrong.
no, that's correct, Kathella. One of the things I was trying to do was uh, there was so much about the novel that came to me as a result of doing some of the research. And when I
Mm.
first moved up to started doing the research, I had read about this community in the New York Times in the 2000. And at the time, I was working on a series of short stories set in Alabama that was set along the Selma to Montgomery March for voting rights in the 60s. And
Oh,
so everyone knew about Dr. King and all the leaders of the marches, but I was interested in the people who lived along the route in those rural Southern communities.
yeah.
My grandmother raised a family in a rural, I'm from Alabama originally.
Hey,
And
shout out Alabama.
yes, and I used to go back to visit my grandmother. And I went back at one point and the community was gone. So, but I remembered the community, and all we had left really were the stories. So when I
Mm.
read this article about the community in Halifax, the people had been forced out of their homes, and the town raised the community, tore down all the houses. And so the BBC, I think it was, did a video about this town. So
Yes.
I was listening to all these stories, and I thought, well, these stories they're telling about this town called Africaville are very similar to this Black town where my grandmother raised a family, where I spent some time as well. And so I started doing the research, and then, but it turns out that the village of Africaville was composed of both Blacks coming up from the American South during the Underground Railroad, and even before, but also
Wow.
Blacks from the Caribbean. And so Kathella is her parents, she actually has a son that's a combination of her lineage, which is Caribbean, and
Yeah.
the father of her son, whose lineage is from the American South. So I needed,
Wow.
I wanted to pair those two, sort of stories up in the novel. So I knew she was going to have some roots in the Caribbean, but I also wanted the next generation, to also honor and to amplify these voices of the American South. So that's how I sort of came up with Kathella, and sort of how her story started to unfold in terms of the generations.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's so interesting that you mentioned that BBC special because I think at one point when I was reading the book, I kept saying, this sounds so familiar. Like I have seen something on this. And I was jogging my mind and I was going through Google trying to figure out what is it? Was it a documentary? Was it a movie? And there was I think it was a PBS movie, sort of like a mini series. Have you ever heard of the Book of Negroes?
Yes, Lawrence Hill, yep. Mhm.
Yes. And that's what it sort of reminded me of. So after I
Mhm.
had that in my head, I kind of had pictures that went along with the story in my head. Even though the imagery in your book is so detailed, I mean, it's almost as if it could be written into a play because you were so detailed about how things were. Have you ever thought about turning it into a play
Well,
or a movie?
interesting that you say that. Last summer, there is a theater out on Long Island called Guild Hall, and they asked
Mm,
me to work with a local director to put on part of the book. So we did a night in which we presented just a small part of the book, and so
yeah,
I wrote the script for that, and I'm actually thinking of expanding that.
you
Sort of,
should.
that's sort of on my list of things to do. Part of it has been performed, and so I'm hoping, to at some point expand it as well.
Yeah, I could definitely see that because I kept seeing, I said, I can see the scenery in my head so clearly. This should be on someone's screen somewhere. This should be. But, and kind of speaking about all of the detail that you put and all the work you put into the book, and you talked about the research. How long did it take you to write the book? Because I know what I heard. You tell me, how long did it take you to write the book?
Well, I was working on those stories. I think it was 1999. Then 2001 was when I read the article. And so I thought, well, you know, that's one way to marry the two stories. There's, these lost communities in the South, and the same thing is happening in the North. There are these Black communities that are no longer exist, but live on in the stories. And so I
Hmm.
started writing it then, and it took 20 years to finally get it written. Now, obviously, other things have happened along the way. You have things in your
Yeah.
life. And I wrote on it and continued to write on it. Some of it also was that it just required a lot of research because it was three generations. It went from different settings,
Hmm.
Halifax, Montreal, Vermont, Alabama, and a little bit of Mississippi,
Yeah.
Jackson, Mississippi as well. And so that took a lot of work. And coming up with all these characters who had to live in the different sections. Each of the generations had to have their own lives.
Hmm.
And then there were all the different layers, as you know, in the book, too.
Yeah.
Uh, in addition to the family saga, there are stories of passing and all of that. So it took a while to get all of that to work in the novel.
Well, I tell you, 20 years, I'm just thinking of myself and all you potential writers or uh, early writers. It took him 20 years for his debut novel. So don't give up. Keep going, you guys. That's okay. Along the time that you were doing your research and you were putting pen to paper and all of those stories and making sure that they all meshed well together, how did you stay motivated? How did you continue to work on a story that wasn't yet fulfilled?
Well, part of it, quite frankly, was there was several moments along the way where I thought I was done.
Oh,
And so, at about probably the 5-year mark, I thought, well, it's probably in pretty good shape. And I would show
yeah.
it to people, and they would give me their feedback, and I have to go back in and work on it again. And I just kept, when you get the feedback and you are told, well, it's great and all of that, but here's some
Mm,
things you need to work on. You're a little bit deflated, so you have to spend your time, working that out. And then
yeah.
I usually would write something else before I get back into the novel, maybe an essay or something
Okay.
like that. And then, but then eventually, when I get,
Right.
get the energy back up again, I'd go back to it. Then you work on it for another 5 years, and then show it again, and then So it was. I think the way I stayed motivated was that um, some of it was that you just don't know that you're
Hmm.
not done yet. So that keeps you going.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm almost done. And then the other thing is that I worked on some other writing projects during
Okay.
that time as well. So this wasn't the only thing I was working on, and I felt I was building my ability to put my name out there as well, getting things
That's
published.
good.
And I figured that would help the novel, help it to sell. So it was that's how I sort of kept it going over that time period.
Okay. That's good framework. That's some good advice for authors and writers who are just getting started or thinking of the path that they don't have to necessarily finish it in a few months or
Mhm.
try and rush through or even think that the ideas or suggestions from other readers aren't valid. So
Right.
listening to those ideas is kind of hard. You mentioned kind of feeling deflated. How do you screen through, oh, they just don't like the type of books that I write, or
Mhm.
they just don't like my style of writing, into they have a valid point. Maybe I
Mhm.
should consider this.
It's a very good question. And one of the things I found when I was getting feedback on the novel was that, you get, you know, all these suggestions, and I consider them all. They sort of fit into categories. There were some
Hmm.
suggestions that were, I felt were all well intent, good, but didn't think that they were going to necessarily work for me. So those I sort of set aside. There were others that um, I thought it'd be sort of nice to do, but I have to wait to see whether I have time to do those. Some I
Okay.
tried. I would try some. Sometimes you just have to, even though you may not think it's going to work,
Yeah.
you may like for example, there was a number of subplots in the book. I took out a whole subplot, wrote it,
Okay.
put it back in, and then took it out again. So
Wow.
there's a number of, so, I have, it's been a whole process of trying some things as well, some of the suggestions. So, and then I think by the time you get to a place, plus I was, I have to say this, I was much older when I started doing this as well. So
Hmm.
my, whole life wasn't sort of, in this novel.
Hmm.
you know, I hope that it sold, and I hope that it progressed. But I could put aside a lot of my ego and listen to people, while at the
Ooh.
same time recognizing my own vision for what I wanted to do. But I would say most of the comments I got back, I think I at least took in and considered, and some I even tried of the ones I didn't do. But a lot of them were very good, though. I did wind up making a lot of changes.
Okay, that's huge. That it kind of reminds me of something a friend of mine, Miss Marita Golden. Shout out Marita. Hey, she she once told me, she's like, everybody wants to write a book, but everybody shouldn't write or learn the craft of writing. Learn how to become a good writer when you want to write a story, when you want to tell it the way that you see it in your head. And so I
Yes.
like how you took the time and input and kind of work through that. I love that. That's beautiful. And something else that I wanted to touch on, I have like a million questions every time I have an author. I never get through them all, but we're going to try
Okay.
anyway. So something I said, what you touched on some superstitions in the book, some of
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
passed down remedies and homegrown things that people kind of do. Were some of those based on any things that were passed down from your family in the generations, or was that from some of the research too?
Well, I'm from the South, so naturally, I have grown up hearing, and also, being, um, uh, seen some of the remedies actually put in place and used for bee stings and all these kinds of. So some of that I
Yeah.
knew that it happened, but the thing I was trying to do there was to. One of the things very interesting I find is that on the one hand, you have a situation in which our elders tell us things about how to solve certain problems, both in our lives, but also basic medical problems. And so,
Yes.
what does a younger generation think of that? And which parts of the superstitions do they hold, and which do they say, well, I don't know about that. And so, I wanted to show this situation in which the grandmothers were saying some things that the younger
Hmm.
generations were saying, okay, well, that I can abide by, but the smothering and all of that, I'm not so sure about. And so
Right.
it was this idea of the way in which things are passed down to subsequent generations. And even if you don't decide to use a certain remedy or a certain medical practice, it stays in your brain. I still remember some of the things that my grandmother, used to give us for certain,
Like what?
not like castor oil, or
Oh yeah.
give you castor oil, or certain things like that to take, and what they put on bee stings, a lemon, and those kinds of things. So I remember
Hmm.
that she could go to the cupboard, and she didn't have to go to the medicine cabinet. She could just go to the cupboard and come up with something. To next thing you know, you're feeling better about it. So that feeling does not go away,
Yeah.
even though you may go to the Dwayne Reed for your medicine nowadays. We still carry those remedies in our brain and in our hearts. So that's what I was trying to accomplish with this idea of the grandmothers talking about this remedy, and then the mothers listening to them on the one hand, but also having their own ideas about things. So the
I like how
generational.
you kind of ingrain that because I am from, if you don't know, I'm from East Texas, in country part of East Texas. And even though I'm far removed from it now, not too far, I still do some of those old things. Like if I have a pain, I will go get cabbage and I will put
Mhm,
cabbage on it for inflammation.
mhm,
And people look at it like, what are you doing with the
right.
cabbage? What are you
Mhm,
doing with the onions on your feet? It
yes.
works. Just know it
Right.
works.
Right. And there's a reason those things stay in our memory.
Yeah.
We carry our history with us and things like
Yeah.
that. So that was what I was trying to get at with that, because I had such strong memories of that growing up, and I wanted to sort of do that in that part of the book.
And speaking about some of the memories you had growing up and being in Alabama, Was it intentional that you kind of brought in Alabama because it's close to home, or
Yes. Quite frankly, I
okay?
was working on those stories simply because, these are people that I knew.
Mm,
The people who lived in rural Alabama were people that I
mm-hmm.
was born in Tuscaloosa, but I also lived partly outside of Tuscaloosa as well. And as I said, my grandmother also raised a family in one of the small communities. And so, and even when in the 70s and 80s, when you used to travel around the state, it was still a very rural community. You go back now,
Yeah,
and some of the cities are now, stretching out, and people don't say they'll say I'm living in the main city now, even though before they were living in the small town. So, but I do remember those towns, and I wanted to keep that memory alive in the writing. And so
that's
it was a way to. I used to publish some of those stories also. It was a way to get some of those stories published. These stories about these rural communities along the Selma to Montgomery March. So it
that's
was
wonderful.
more, that for one of the reasons I was doing it.
That's great. Great. I love how you kind of weaved in. I always find something I see in a lot of historical fiction, because I read a lot of historical fiction, is the towns may be fictional or imaginary, but they're so familiar, they're so close to reality that it's not as if you can ignore certain things. And they either intersect with a real place, or they make you feel as if it's so real that this place could be somewhere I could look them on a map. Even now, I'm going to throw this out there. Wakanda made me feel like Wakanda was real, even though it was fictional. And that's kind of
Right.
how it felt
Mm-hmm.
reading Africaville. Like, I should go and discover Africaville and
Mm-hmm.
figure out where my people are from. I may not even have people there, but I wanted to go just to see. Do you
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel? I had one author at one point say that these fictional locations serve as a protection for the characters. Do you think it kind of serves as a way to be hopeful of way things could have been if certain things didn't exist, or a way for characters to go through things without feeling as if someone um, in reality has been touched by it? I
Mm-hmm.
know that's a loaded question.
Well, the one of the things that I found as I was writing about this researching this town of Africaville was the way in which the things that held the community together. What were some of the things that held the community together, and how much of those things I recognized? So that was one of the ways that I could get into writing the story. There were so many things, and it was a Baptist church. They
Mm-hmm.
had, it was a little store there. The neighbors were, with the certain gossip that the neighbors talked about, that you respected the elders. The kids got in trouble. The boys did certain things. The girls did certain things during a certain time period. So some of that was easily transferable. So in writing about Africaville, as I called it, I could draw on a lot of that in, putting together the town itself. And then
Yeah.
one thing that was also similar was the degree to which they were wrestling with the outside world. One of the things that I really had to struggle with was how they were going to handle the event that happens to one of the girls in the book. There was no civil rights movement. You couldn't call the NAACP. You couldn't call Reverend Jesse Jack. You couldn't do all those
Mm.
things that, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
we were very fond of doing. Now we don't do it so much anymore, but, we could do things like that then. They had to find a way to deal with the larger white community, which was, oppressing them.
Yeah.
And the oppression was shown in this one event. And that was interesting because I couldn't write it as if it were happening today. So that was one way in which I struggled with trying to decide, well, what is this community about, and how do they work through their closeness and their
Mm-hmm.
ability to be a community when they've got these things happening outside of them, these injustices. How do they handle those? That was one
Right.
of the things that I worked through in the book.
That's awesome.
Um,
But there was one kind of speaking of struggling. You know how you read books and you really start to like the characters and you really learn them and you think you're talking to them in your head. There was one character that worked my nerves. Ooh, Kendra.
oh,
It, I just kept saying, why are you going with her?
Right.
Like,
Hmm.
you have that one friend that is
Hmm.
fun, but it's just like
Right.
every
Yes.
time I'm around you, something is
Hmm.
going bananas. What that's kind of everybody has that friend.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so
And that
true. Yeah. She
it
was.
was oh
She
go
was.
ahead, go ahead.
She was interesting to write for that reason as well. I have a friend like that, and sometimes I'm that way to my friends. But I, in writing her, uh, one of the things that I was trying to do also was that one of the things that also is different in the 1930s is how we deal with undiagnosed mental
Mm,
issues. So
yeah.
so on the one hand, you sort of say, well, is she, or something is going on with her, like it came out of
Yes.
the fever that she suffered. And so you sort of say, well, in the parents, you look at a child like that and say, well, she's like they were saying about her, she's smart and she's this and she's that, but
She a little
she's getting in
touch.
trouble all the time. And so, she didn't have the advantage of, sort of people being able to say, well, let's take a look really at her. What happened to you? Well, I had this fever when I was a kid. Well, maybe we should look at that. Get
Hmm.
medical help, or get at least so you could at least find out whether or not it was that causing the problems, or whether she just was, some people are, they
Yes.
just are totally get in trouble. But she was difficult. I didn't know which. It was a thin line between sort of telling the reader, well, yes, she does have mental problems, and also leaving it a little bit open. I decided to leave
Yes.
it a little bit open, just suggest it based on the fever. But you're
Because I
right,
kept
she is.
looking at her like
I
if
know,
she
right?
don't go on. And
It's
then I
amazing.
felt bad that I was mad at her. Now,
And she was an interesting character to write, I think, because on the one hand, she was very smart, and she could have, she probably
yes.
in another world, maybe she would have gotten, because she had two parents. It wasn't like she had, but they were dealing with their own struggles.
Most of them do.
Yes.
That's okay. But kind of speaking of the characters too in the story, the main character, Miss Kathella, you're writing from the viewpoint of a young black girl. How do you get to that viewpoint as a black man? Like, did you ask for guidance? Did you do focus groups, or did you kind of ask for some feedback on saying, does this sound like some things or some experiences that she would have, or how did you get to that?
Well, one of the interesting things about my life is that I grew up with three sisters,
Mm.
and a mother, and a grandmother, and a great grandmother.
Oh wow.
Yes,
All the
we had five
generations.
generations of women at one point in the family, and so I grew up listening to um, conversations, and I just sort of I think I used an amalgam of either sisters or aunts, or I had a lot to pull on, to draw on
Hmm.
when I was coming up with those characters, and neighbors. And so quite frankly, that's what I wound up doing, because what you're doing, even when you're putting something down on a page, you really are putting on the page the author's idea of this character, and you can only get it from what they experienced. And so I sort
Right.
of I use a lot of I went back and tried to remember, some of the experiences I had growing up, and there were lots of them because I say I had three sisters, um,
Okay.
and my mother and my father are each one of 10,
Oh wow.
and so I had lots of aunts as well,
Ooh.
and so I think I just drew on that for the most part, I would say,
Okay.
especially the younger
Yeah,
Catholic,
yeah.
because I have very very vivid memories of my sisters when I was younger.
Hmm.
I was sort of a middle child, so I had an older sister and two younger sisters. So I had both the sister who doted on me as an older sister, and also the younger sisters who I had, sort of a certain relationship with as well. So
Yeah, yeah. No brothers.
I have one brother. Yes.
One brother. Okay. See, I almost forgot you, brother. Yeah, I almost forgot you. But I get that for sure. I'm a one of three girls, just all girls, no brothers for sure. But
Okay.
that's good, kind of drawing from those experiences. So when you have such a big family, I'm sure they have all read your book, and if not, y'all should have got the book. But I'm sure they've all read the book. what kind of feedback did you get from the family? Did some of them say this sounds a little familiar, or did anybody have any feedback like that on your
Well,
book?
I have not. Some of them I know. Some of them have don't want to say anything to me yet about it. Oh, my aunt did have a comment about it. She's, they just tell you, oh, I liked it. They give you those kind of comments. I haven't heard
Yeah,
anything big yet from them. I'm sort of waiting till I've really seen a lot of my family because of COVID recently.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm sure that when I see them in person, they may have something to say about it. But I have
Mm.
heard from a lot of old classmates, old
Mm.
neighbors, people have been calling and sending me emails that they've got the
Oh,
book and they're reading it. So I have been getting plenty of feedback from people that I haven't heard from, and since I was in
see,
college or high school.
you're gonna have a lot of new friends, a lot of new friends trying to get to know you. Yes, well, that's awesome. I love how your family will read your books and support you. That's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, kind of speaking of the background of your writing and how you kind of got started, were there any literary heroes or authors that kind of motivated you, like to style yourself after?
Well, one author who I really was, obsessed with is Zora Neale Hurston.
Ooh,
And one of the reasons I was because, being a African American from Alabama, wanting to become a writer, it's not like, for example, Mississippi or one of the other states that have, there's a huge, number of Black writers who've come out of
mm-hmm.
that, who you sort of know. But 20, 30 years ago, all I knew was Zora Neale Hurston. And when I found out she was from Alabama, I was, really impressed. So I just started researching her and reading her works. As a matter of fact, I wrote a number of essays. I wrote one essay called Zora Neale and My Sister about my going to her hometown of Monticello, Alabama, to try to see her home where she was from. I wrote
Ah,
that, and I also did I did some reviewing of her books. So I was really, and at the opening of the novel, there is a passage in the book where it talks about the man with the square toe, death with a
mm-hmm.
square toe. That is an homage, if you will, to Zora Neale Hurston's
Okay.
Their Eyes Were Watching God, the great man, Death in the Clouds with the Square Toes. So I even
Yeah.
put her in my novel. So she's one that I really have been I just think one of the things I like about her is that, you know, whether it's true or not, I believe she had no predecessor. She was a Black
Hmm.
woman coming up in the Harlem Renaissance, wholly formed. I mean, who was she going to? She
Yes.
didn't copy anybody. There was nobody to copy. She did it. So I believe that. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. I mean,
I
for a writer nowadays, there's so many writers, both Black
yes.
and white out here, that if you have plenty of people you can draw from. But in her case, to me, it just was a monumental task that she pulled together those novels because
Mm-hmm.
she had to have a certain vision and also a talent. And work hard at it. So I was really impressed by her. And then I would say on the nonfiction side, I would say Baldwin with all of his essays. I used to read those all the time, and I like reading those. And the poets, of course. My mother used to recite, the poetry and the poems to me growing up all the time. So
Really?
yeah, she loved reciting a lot of the poets, and also dramatist. You know,
Huh.
when I saw Jitney, it was a revelation. When I saw that play, I really do like theater as well. So I sort of draw my inspiration from
Okay.
those authors, and then also one other thing is the visual arts.
Mm.
I almost was going to use a painting for the passing. There was a painting, but I forget the name of the author. Nella Larson's book,
Nella
Passing.
Larson.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so she had a painting on the cover that I was just so taken with. And so I like going to museums and looking at the Black artists, and I get inspiration from them as well. So those are the main
Okay.
inspirations for my work.
You can see that in your book, and all the characteristics that you like about Zora Neale Hurston. It's apparent in the work and the hard work that you put into this, which is beautiful. So I
Thank
definitely
you.
say for all of you authors out there, take notes. He is dropping gems for you for sure. It is not a simple and easy task to do. Be motivated, have hard work, do your research. If you're going to write about something, do your research, please. So he has definitely dropped some knowledge on you. A few other things from your past that you kind of mentioned was your history in the military. Did that kind of guide any of your work at all? Or how did you even say, I want to be a writer? Was that just kind of always in your head, or did you kind of move into that journey?
Well, it actually I sort of started out in high school. I actually wrote a play. I used to write
Okay.
plays in high school, and then once I went to the military, it just sort of, all of that, the Naval Academy, I didn't do very much. Although I used to write skits about all of my classmates.
Oh, I'm
There were a
sure they
group,
love that.
there was a group of us. At the Naval Academy, you have six battalions of midshipmen. Well,
Okay.
the Black Battalion, we call ourselves the seventh batch. And so we would
Mm,
all get together and meet. But anyway, so I used to write about everybody in that. And so I used to write these books, and they all passed them around, and they'd read the books. And, so I did a little bit of writing, but not much. And then
yeah.
years passed before I sort of picked it up again. I was working in philanthropy, going out, a place called the Boston Foundation, which was actually run by the woman who ran, an African-American woman whose father was the first African-American head of Howard University. Her
Oh,
name's Anna
wow.
Faith Jones. But I used to go out and do site visits, and I had to write very quickly. So I
Hmm.
couldn't keep up. So I took a $150 class, journalism class. And then I happened to look at the catalog. It had a fiction class. So that's how I sort of began to start taking some fiction classes. But it took a while, let me tell you. I was not a creative writing person in college.
Yeah.
And so I knew I had to stick with it, and I'm still learning, quite frankly. It's what I found, even with this new book I'm writing now, what surprises me is the amount of work you have to put into your writing. And when you start a new project, it is just
Mhm.
amazing just how difficult it is, to get through a novel. They're not easy. And
Yeah.
so, and even when after I finished the book and I had gotten it to my editors. The book was bought by HarperCollins Canada and HarperCollins USA. And so, they normally what happens is you get two editors. And so you get two editorial letters since it was two different deals. But
Hmm.
since it was HarperCollins, they asked me if I wanted one or two. And I said one. And so the editor in Canada got together with the editor in the US, and they gave me one editorial letter. But let me tell you, and you think you're done, and then you get this, it can be as long as 22 pages, single spaced.
Wow.
And so, luckily, mine wasn't that long, but there was a lot in there. Let me tell you. So there was all of that you have to do. So it's a haul to get one finished, and it's a haul to get one revised, because one of the things that I
Hmm.
found interesting was that they don't give you much time to do the revisions. So I say to a young writer or a writer who's new to this, make sure you take your time with your novel, and make sure you do other projects along the way so you can develop your writing skills. Because
Yeah.
once you get to a commercial publisher, you have to turn around things quickly. You're a
Hmm.
professional now. There is no, you can't, I may have taken 20 years to
Yeah.
finish the book, but I did not have 20 years to do the revisions. They want their once they pay for the
Exactly.
book, they want their, revisions done quickly. So that was interesting for
When you
me.
were writing it, did you ever think of self-publishing, of just putting it out there yourself and then just say, hey, if somebody else wants it, they come and get it? Or were you always kind of thinking that you wanted it to be a traditional publisher and you wanted that input?
Well, I wanted a traditional publisher mainly because I figured they would have the wherewithal to both publicize the book and help it
Mm,
get out to a wider audience.
gotcha.
I know that some people have self-published and have gone on to put in the work and then get picked up by
Hmm.
especially now, recently, it's gotten to be at a point where a lot of people are doing that. But I think when I was working on it, it wasn't quite in my mind to go that route at the time.
Hmm.
So I just
Hmm.
figured a traditional publisher would be good for the book. I wasn't even thinking Amistad, as a matter of fact. I was so happy when
Yeah.
they bought it, but I was thinking, well, I was hoping that somebody would pick it up.
Well, they did. They definitely did. And now I think I've seen it, because you're not on Instagram, right, Jeffrey?
No, I'm
You
not.
should be on Instagram. Come join the family. It's a whole family of bookstagrammers out there, and we share books. Well, your book came across the feed. I don't even know how many times it's been shared. It's been liked. People talk about it. They do little mini reviews. It's everywhere. There's a whole little community out there.
Oh, wow.
So, bookstagram, booktubers, Facebookers, all the groups are talking about it. So, all these people that are reading your book, what would you want them to like get from the book? What is like the compilation of things that you want people to draw from the story?
Well, one of the main thing that I wanted people to, when I was writing the book, I was thinking that, you know, here is a story of a community. We all grew up in communities of some sort. They may have been small, just a couple of family members, or they may be a large community. And so I feel in the book gets at some of the things that hold people together.
Hmm.
You know, that's one of the reasons why when I was working on the subsequent generations, there was this struggle between what pulls you away from a community and what binds you to it. And so
Yeah.
I want to, and so I think people can relate to that because, I don't live in Alabama anymore, but I still have a strong connection to that community. It's still living within me. So I think readers can, I think, connect with that idea that, there is something, there's family, there's a person in their life, there's a community in their life that they have a connection to. Some of
Yeah.
them are not with them now. They may have been passed on, they may be gone, or they may be away from you in terms of distance. But there is a connection there. And I think that the book explores a lot of those connections and some of the things that pull us apart. Because,
Yeah.
and some of the things that pull us apart are things like identity. And in
Mm-hmm.
the case of Etienne, he passes for white. And in the
Yes.
case of Warner, he finds out he has a Black grandmother and wants to get back. And of course, that is a struggle. The community wants nothing to do with him, but he has to work for that.
That
But
is
he
a
wants it. He does want that community. So I think that is what I would want readers to sort of, as they're reading the book, to that will come across this idea of community and what it means and the struggles,
mm-hmm.
but also the benefits, because there are quite a lot, I can tell you, to having being
Oh yeah.
from a strong community. It energizes us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And that's something that everybody can relate to, no matter um, people, tend to read certain types of books, certain genres of book, or they fall in love with a particular author. I've always been the one to love a story, and this is a story that can reach everything, reach no matter what your background or what your genre may be. You will really enjoy this story. Something that I found really interesting too was you kind of touched on the families being broken apart and the connections. When you were researching, did you anytime I'm going through like some historical research or something, I always wind up digging into my family's history and learning more about my family just as a product of it. Did you come across anything that was like really interesting that now you can hold it in your pocket? Like I found out my mother is the next generation pie maker or something.
Well, I think I was working on the book at the time, and I think my mother is not with me anymore. But I think I interviewed her, and we were talking about my grandfather, and I've never seen a picture of him. And I don't think how when you're growing up, they probably tell you stories, but you don't remember. You don't,
Yeah, you don't quite
you wait
listen.
until you wait until you finally have to. Usually at a funeral or something, you
Yeah.
start asking all these questions. But I was asking all these questions, and I was finding out some things about him. And so and she was sort of telling me these things, and I'm thinking, well, I didn't know this. Maybe I didn't want to hear it I wasn't ready to hear it. I guess I could put it
Mm-hmm.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some family things there in my sort of historical things that I didn't even know where he had died. My grandfather, for example. I mean, these
Huh.
small little things. And so I think I got closer to him through talking to her while I was writing the book, because I had written about
Yeah.
Warner and his desire to find out about his own family and some of the things
Mm-hmm.
he was trying to do. I realized that I probably should do as well.
See?
Do some
That
research. So
I'm sure your family has a lot of rich history with 10 siblings on one side,
mhm,
on both sides.
mhm.
That's a book in itself. You ever thought about writing that?
I'm actually, I've been sort of, people have been sort of saying, I think I have to hold off until I'm trying to get my writing chops together. Because one of the things about writing about the military is that um, it's, you want to make it a unique, strong story, I
Hmm.
feel. And so, when I have sort of come up with something that I feel is either a memoir or something like that, that I feel is powerful enough, or that I want to work on, for a while, I think I will sit down and do that.
I could
Because
see that.
because it was interesting because I when I went to the Naval Academy, it was the first class of women of the Naval Academy when I graduated. It was also the first Black African American graduate,
Oh,
female graduate was
yeah,
in my
write
class.
that. Write that story. I want
That
to
is so.
hear that.
Not to mention before that, integrating the public school in Alabama, and so there's all of that. But making it resonate, you have to sort of you have
Hmm.
to find a way into it. So I'm still
Yeah.
working that through, finding the
Well,
right way in for that.
well, speaking of working through, what is next? You said you were working on some things. Can you give us a glimpse into what you're working on without telling us what you're working on? I know we'll wait. We'll wait. But
Okay, well, it is one of the things I was doing in Providence was there's a library there that has supposedly the largest repository of pre uh, 1800s historical documents in the country. And so my next book is set in Mobile, Alabama,
oh,
and it's an alternative history story,
okay.
and it's based loosely on. I'll tell you a little bit of the main character is the son of a African American classical musician who lived in New Orleans, and he has arrived in Mobile trying to make his way. So
Mm,
the story is about uh, what happens to him when he arrives in this place, this cauldron of activity, Mobile,
yeah.
Alabama, which was actually the first French colony, first French city in the States before New Orleans. It was established before New Orleans, Mobile
See.
was. So it has very strong sort of, French Canadian roots, but it also had a very strong Black and Creole population. So
Yeah.
it's a interesting mix of people in there. So I'm still doing some of the research now,
Okay.
and so that's the a little bit about the new novel.
Well, I am ready to read that now. So I'm gonna tell y'all now, if you are not following him at jeffreycolvin.com, go to his website, subscribe, and follow him so you'll be let you know about when the book is coming out and you can pre-order it. And if you can
Yes.
also pre-order at bookmag.org, feel free to do so. You can go to all the sites where his book will be. If you haven't already gotten Africaville, get it. But sign up too so you can follow them and keep up with everything that's going on. So before we go, I know we are coming up on our time here, and I want to be mindful of your time.
Mhm.
I didn't see any questions coming through. I see a lot of shout outs. You got a whole lot of folks saying, hey,
Oh,
hey. So,
that's wonderful.
hello, all of you followers. And I'm sure that this will be watched again and people will share it and love it. So, before I go, I do want to find out, are there any authors right now that you're reading? Like, what are you reading right now?
Well, interesting that you asked. I was just sent a copy of um, it's a advanced review copy. I guess Amistad is publishing Ramadan Ramzi, a new author. Well, he's not new.
Okay.
He had a book out before, and he's got a book coming out called let's think Ramadan Ramsey, a novel. Lewis Edwards. I'm reading that. I have to, I've been asked to read that and give my comments on that,
All
and
right.
I'm reading that. That's what I'm digging into this weekend. I get occasionally I'll get asked to read, and I do a lot of reading for residencies, that
Okay.
kind of stuff. So I have some stuff I got to do there, but that's my main reading for this weekend. But I've been doing a lot. Mainly, I've been trying to get my. I've got a lot of research material that I'm going through that I collected in the
Mm-hmm.
fall that I'm trying to get through, and also trying to get some writing done, some of the scenes written as well.
Got you. Got you. Okay. Well, that's a lot of exciting work, and I love how you're constantly reading. Reading is important, you guys. So get your books. You see, I keep my books everywhere, and you can't even see the books not in the camera. They are everywhere. So I love to kind of always let our viewers know what's coming next. So thank you, Jeffrey. This has been amazing. You have given us such a depth and breadth of your work, and we are excited to continue to follow your journey. And I will keep shouting you out, even if you're not on Instagram. I'm a puppy on Instagram anyway. They will know about you on IG. But
Well,
next
thank
up,
you.
you're welcome, welcome. Do you want to leave our viewers with anything at all? Any final words? Any tips?
Well, I would say that if there are any writers out there, please keep at it. We need those stories. You know, it seems as if there are a lot of Black writers coming, but it's not true. The more we need
Mm,
more. So
bring
I
them.
would say, and thank you to all the readers, of course. Thank you so much.
Love it, love it. Well, I love to end our breakthrough series with a quote, and I always try and find quotes that somehow speak to me. So this may or may not speak well, but I thought it fit. So this one is by my man, James Baldwin. I love James Baldwin. He says, "For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it always must be heard. There isn't any other tale to tell. It's the only light we've got in all this darkness." So tell those stories,
I
read
agree.
the stories. This is our history, this is our legacy, and these are our voices. So thank you for sharing your voice with us. And thank you all for viewing and continue to share. And as always, you can follow us on Book Mecca, bookmecca.org. You can go to our Facebook at Book Mecca of Texas, IG book.mecca, or you can just hit me up. I'm always everywhere. Shaylin Scott, you can find me. So without further ado, you guys have a wonderful night. And thank you again, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Shaylon, for having me. I
You're
enjoyed it.
welcome. Thanks.